My son called me at 11 p.m., drunk on excitement, to tell me he'd just surprised his mother-in-law with an $8,500 trip to Brazil. Except the surprise was on me, because that was my entire surgery fund, and their flight was leaving in 9 hours. That Tuesday evening, I sat hunched over my dining room table in our small Phoenix apartment, squinting at the insurance form spread before me like a puzzle I couldn't solve. The orthopedic surgeon's office had sent a thick packet detailing my upcoming knee replacement, a procedure I'd waited 18 months to schedule. At 62, my left knee had deteriorated to the point where climbing stairs felt like walking on broken glass, and Dr. Patel warned that without surgery, I'd be using a walker within 2 years. The insurance would cover most of it, but I still needed $8,500 for the specialized physical therapy, the home care nurse, and various out-of-pocket expenses. Every dollar of that money sat safely in a separate savings account I'd opened specifically for this surgery. Money I'd scraped together from my part-time job at the library, skipping dinners out, buying generic groceries, and selling my late mother's china set. My husband Robert looked up from his crossword puzzle when my phone rang at 11:03 p.m. "That's odd," he said. "Who calls this late?" The caller ID showed Kieran's name, and my heart immediately jumped to worst-case scenarios. Had something happened to little Sophia? Was there an emergency? "Mom!" Kieran's voice was practically vibrating with excitement when I answered. "I know it's late, but I couldn't wait until morning to tell you this amazing news." Relief flooded through me. Not an emergency. Just Kieran being impulsive as usual. "What's got you so wound up, honey?" "We did it. We actually did it. I just booked the most incredible surprise for Isabella's mom. We're taking her to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro for 10 days. I'm literally looking at the confirmation emails right now. Flights, 5-star resort, everything. She's going to absolutely lose her mind when we tell her tomorrow morning." My pen stopped moving over the insurance forms. Robert raised an eyebrow at my expression. "That sounds incredibly expensive, Kieran. How did you manage something like that?" There was a pause, then that casual laugh that I would later realize was the sound of my world crashing down. "Oh, I used that emergency card you gave me last year, the medical one. You said I could use it if something really important came up, and Mom, this is huge. Isabella's mom hasn't been the same since her husband died. This could change everything for her." The words hit me like a physical blow. That card, the emergency card I'd given him during his unemployment, with explicit, crystal-clear instructions that it was only for true emergencies. Hospital bills, car breakdowns, life-or-death situations, not surprise vacations to South America. "Kieran," I said slowly, my voice barely steady as Robert leaned closer to listen. "That money is for my knee surgery next month." "Oh, right, your surgery." Another pause. "Well, we've already paid for everything, Mom. Non-refundable. And honestly, we leave in 9 hours, so there's really no going back now." 9 hours. They were leaving in 9 hours with my surgery money, and my son was telling me this like he just mentioned what he had for dinner. The phone felt heavy in my hand as Kieran's words echoed in my mind. Tomorrow morning. They were leaving tomorrow morning with my surgery money, and he was telling me this like he just mentioned picking up groceries. "Kieran, you can't be serious," I whispered, my throat constricting. "That's my entire medical fund. I need that money for the surgery, for recovery, for everything the insurance won't cover." Robert immediately got up from his chair and came to stand behind me, his hand gently resting on my shoulder for support. "Mom, relax," Kieran said, and I could hear him moving around, probably packing. "It's not like you're having surgery tomorrow. You've got time to save up again, right? Besides, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Isabella's mom. She's never been out of the country, never even seen the ocean." My hands started shaking. Save up again? It had taken me 2 years to accumulate that money, working extra shifts at the Phoenix Public Library, taking on weekend tutoring jobs, eating ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I cared to count. The surgery was scheduled for next month because that's when Dr. Patel had an opening. And if I missed this window, I'd be back on the 18-month waiting list. "Kieran, this isn't just about money," I said. trying to keep my voice level. "This is about my health, my ability to walk properly. You said you understood that when I gave you the emergency card." "And this is an emergency," he replied, his tone shifting slightly defensive. "Isabella's been so stressed lately, and her mom has been depressed since her dad died last year. This trip could really help them both heal. Sometimes family emergencies aren't just medical, you know." Robert squeezed my shoulder, and I could see the anger building in his eyes. He'd been skeptical of giving Kieran the card from the beginning. I stared at the surgery paperwork scattered across our small dining table, each form a reminder of what I was facing. The physical therapy schedule that started 2 weeks post-surgery, the home modifications I'd need to make, the special equipment I'd have to rent, all of it calculated down to the penny, and now all of it impossible. "How much did you spend?" I asked quietly. "The whole thing? About $8,000. But Mom, you should see the resort. Private beach, spa treatments, the works. Isabella's mom is going to cry when she sees it." $8,000. Almost everything I had saved. Gone. For massages and beach chairs while I faced the possibility of permanent disability. Robert was gesturing for me to hand him the phone, but I shook my head. "I have to go," I managed to say. "Great. I'll send you pictures from Rio. Love you, Mom." The line went dead, and I sat in the silence of our small apartment, surrounded by medical forms I could no longer afford to use, while Robert paced behind me, muttering words I'd never heard him use before. That night, Robert and I couldn't sleep. We kept thinking about how we'd ended up here, living paycheck to paycheck at 62, dependent on our son's promises, with no safety net except the money he'd just taken to Brazil. 3 years ago, when Kieran and Isabella had their daughter Sophia, they'd begged us to move from our comfortable retirement in Tucson to Phoenix to help with childcare. "Just temporarily," Kieran had promised, "until we get on our feet with the baby." We'd sold our little house, downsized to this cramped apartment, and uprooted our entire lives to support them. The temporary help had stretched into 3 years. We provided free childcare while both Kieran and Isabella worked. We contributed to their rent when money was tight, and we'd become their permanent safety net for every crisis that arose. When Kieran lost his marketing job last year, we'd co-signed the lease on their upgraded house because they couldn't afford the deposit. When Isabella wanted to go back to school for her interior design certification, we helped cover their mortgage for 6 months so she could focus on studies. When their car broke down and needed a $3,000 transmission repair, they didn't have savings. Could we cover it just this once? Each request came with tears from Isabella, apologies from Kieran, and promises that they'd pay us back as soon as things settled down. But things never settled down. There was always another crisis, another unexpected expense, another reason why they needed us to open our wallets. Robert and I had started working part-time jobs to make ends meet. I took evening shifts at the library, and Robert picked up handyman work around the complex. Our modest Social Security checks barely covered our rent and groceries, so every dollar we earned went either to their emergencies or into my surgery fund. We hadn't been out to dinner in 2 years. We'd canceled our cable subscription, our magazine subscriptions, even our modest gym memberships. Meanwhile, Kieran and Isabella lived in a 3-bedroom house with granite countertops and a 2-car garage. Isabella posted Instagram photos of her weekend brunches, her new designer purses, her monthly nail appointments. When we visited for Sunday dinner, I'd noticed the expensive bottles of wine in their kitchen, the latest streaming services queued up on their smart TV, the fresh flowers Isabella bought every week because they make the house feel alive. "We created this monster," Robert said quietly in the darkness. "By always saying yes, always finding a way to help, we taught them that our money was their money." He was right. By always being the solution to their problems, we'd taught them that our needs were optional while theirs were urgent. The emergency card had been my biggest mistake. I'd given it to Kieran during his unemployment with explicit instructions. Hospital bills, car repairs, truly urgent situations only. I'd trusted him to understand the difference between a want and a need. But Brazil wasn't an emergency. It was a luxury purchased with my pain medication, my physical therapy, my chance to walk normally again. "Tomorrow we start saying no," Robert said firmly, "to everything." As I lay awake that night, my knee throbbing with the deep ache that had become my constant companion, memories started flooding back like a dam had burst. This wasn't the first time they'd crossed a line. It was just the biggest line they'd crossed yet. Last Christmas, Robert and I had saved up $600 to buy gifts for Kieran, Isabella, and 3-year-old Sophia. We found beautiful presents for each of them, things they'd admired but would never buy for themselves. When we gave them the gifts, Isabella opened her box, glanced at the jewelry set, and said, "Oh, these are nice, but we were really hoping for cash this year. We're trying to save for a down payment on a bigger house." She didn't even try to hide her disappointment. Then there was Isabella's birthday dinner 2 months ago. Robert and I had offered to take the family out to celebrate, thinking we'd go somewhere modest. Isabella chose the most expensive steakhouse in Phoenix, ordered a $75 bottle of wine, and invited her sister and brother-in-law to join us, without telling us. When the check came to $410, she sat there scrolling through her phone, while Robert and I quietly split the bill. Our food barely touched because we were calculating how many shifts we'd need to work to cover it. But the pattern went deeper than just money. There was the way Isabella would criticize my cooking when I made dinner for them, suggesting I use better quality ingredients, while eating the meal I'd spent hours preparing. The way Kieran would drop by unannounced and ask Robert to fix something in their house, then leave without offering to pay for parts or labor. They'd even convinced us to cancel our planned trip to visit my sister Rachel in Oregon last summer. "Mom, Dad, we really need you here," Kieran had said. "Isabella's starting her new classes, Sophia's been fussy, and I've got this big project at work. Could you postpone the trip? Family first, right?" We'd lost the $800 in non-refundable plane tickets and hotel reservations. Rachel and I hadn't seen each other in 4 years. The worst part was how they made us feel guilty for wanting anything for ourselves. When I mentioned needing new glasses because my prescription was outdated, Isabella had sighed and said, "I wish we could help, but money's really tight right now." This was 2 days after she'd posted photos of her weekend shopping spree at Scottsdale Fashion Square. When I'd finally saved enough for my surgery fund, I made the mistake of telling them I felt proud of reaching my goal. Kieran's response? "That's great, Mom, but maybe keep some of it accessible, you know? Just in case we have any emergencies before your surgery." I should have seen it then, the way his eyes lit up when he said accessible. To him, my surgery fund wasn't my lifeline. It was their vacation fund waiting to be claimed. They'd trained Robert and me to see our own needs as selfish, our own financial security as a resource they could tap whenever their wants exceeded their income. And like fools, we'd gone along with it, believing that being good parents meant sacrificing everything for our adult son's comfort. Robert squeezed my hand in the darkness. "No more," he whispered. "We're done being their personal bank." The next morning, I called in sick to work. My knee was screaming, but it was my mind that couldn't function. Robert and I sat at our kitchen table with cups of cold coffee, staring at my phone, willing myself to call the surgeon's office and ask about postponing the surgery. The conversation I dreaded having. Around noon, Kieran stopped by on his way to the airport. He bounced through our front door like he was walking on clouds, wheeling a shiny new suitcase behind him. "Hey, Mom, Dad. Just wanted to grab some snacks for the flight." Isabella's waiting in the car with Sophia and her mom. He headed straight for our pantry like he owned the place. Robert and I watched him stuff granola bars and crackers into his carry-on bag, snacks we'd bought with grocery money we'd carefully budgeted, and something inside me snapped. "Kieran, sit down," I said quietly. "Can't, Mom. Our Uber to the airport is coming in 20 minutes. Traffic's going to be insane." Robert stood up, and his voice carried a tone I'd rarely heard. "Your mother said sit down." Something in both our tones made Kieran look up. He slowly closed his bag and perched on the edge of our couch, checking his phone. "I called Dr. Patel's office this morning," I said. I had to ask about postponing my surgery because I no longer have the money to pay for it. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I told you you'll save it up again. You and Dad are good with money. Kieran, your mother is 62 years old, Robert said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We work part-time jobs at our age. It took us 2 years to save $8,500. 2 years of skipping meals, working weekends, selling your grandmother's jewelry. And you spent it in 10 minutes on a vacation website. It's not just a vacation, Kieran said defensively. This is important to Isabella. Her mom has been through a lot since her dad died. And what about what your mother's been through? Robert asked, standing up slowly. What about the nights she can't sleep because of the pain? What about the fact that she might need a wheelchair if this gets worse? Does any of that matter to you? Kieran looked genuinely surprised, as if the thought had never occurred to him. Of course it matters, Dad. But you're both being dramatic. It's just knee surgery. People get that all the time. Just knee surgery. Robert and I stared at our son, this 34-year-old man who still saw his parents as an unlimited resource rather than human beings with their own needs and limitations. You're right, I said calmly. People do get knee surgery all the time. People who can afford it. Mom, don't be like this. We're trying to build good family relationships here. Isabella's mom could really use this trip, especially after losing her husband. What about us, Kieran? Robert asked. When do our needs come first? He checked his phone again. Look, we'll talk about this when I get back, okay? Maybe we can figure out a payment plan for Mom's surgery or something. A payment plan for my own money that he'd stolen. That's when I knew. My son wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to suddenly develop empathy or financial responsibility. He saw Robert and me as his personal bank, and as long as we kept allowing withdrawals, he'd keep making them. Have a wonderful trip, I said, my voice flat. He kissed my cheek and headed for the door. Love you guys. Don't worry about the surgery thing. It'll work out. As the door closed behind him, Robert and I sat back down. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The account linked to that emergency card he'd taken to Brazil. What are you thinking? Robert asked. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that it's time our son learned about consequences. After Kieran left for the airport, Robert and I sat in our quiet apartment and made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. We weren't going to be their ATM anymore, but we also weren't going to be the screaming, hysterical parents trying to ruin their vacation. We were going to be strategic. I called our bank first. I need to report unauthorized use of my debit card, I told the customer service representative. When did you first notice the unauthorized charges? She asked. Today, when I saw charges totaling over $8,000 that I did not authorize. It wasn't technically a lie. I hadn't authorized those charges. I'd given Kieran access for emergencies, not vacations. I'll freeze the card immediately and send you a new one within 3 business days. In the meantime, I can transfer any remaining funds to your primary checking account for safekeeping. Perfect. The card would be dead before they even landed in Rio. Next, I called our neighbor Mrs. Chen, who worked as a paralegal downtown. Helen, I need some legal advice. If someone uses a debit card you gave them for emergencies, but they use it for personal expenses instead, what are my options? That depends, she said carefully. Did you give them written permission to use the card for any purpose, or was it specifically limited to emergencies? Specifically emergencies. I have text messages where I told my son it was only for hospital bills or urgent car repairs. Save those texts. You might need them. Then I did something that surprised even Robert. I called Dr. Patel's office and moved my surgery up instead of postponing it. There'd been a cancellation for the following Monday, and they could fit me in if I wanted the earlier slot. Yes, I said without hesitation. I'll take it. The scheduling nurse was confused. But didn't you call this morning about postponing due to financial constraints? I've resolved the financial issue, I said, and I had. If the surgery cost $8,500, and I had $134 left in my account after Kieran's Brazil shopping spree, I'd figure out the rest. I'd take out a medical loan, use my credit card, sell our car if I had to. What I wouldn't do was wait 18 more months while my son and daughter-in-law sipped caipirinhas on Copacabana Beach with my mobility. Finally, I called my sister Rachel in Oregon. We'd been playing phone tag for weeks, but she answered on the second ring. "Janet, I was just thinking about you. How's the knee?" "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not talk me out of it." I explained everything. The Brazil trip, the stolen surgery money, the frozen card, the moved-up surgery date. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "It's about time." "What?" "Janet, Robert, I've been watching you sacrifice yourselves for that boy for years. Remember when you canceled your Oregon trip? I knew it was because of them, and I was furious. You raised a good kid, but somewhere along the way, you taught him that your needs don't matter." "He's going to hate us," I said quietly. "No, he's going to learn that actions have consequences. There's a difference." That evening, Robert and I prepared for my surgery, like we were preparing for battle. We organized my recovery supplies, arranged for grocery delivery, even prepaid our utilities for the next 2 months. Whatever happened when Kieran got back from Brazil, we'd be ready. "You know," Robert said as we double-checked our preparations, "I haven't felt this hopeful in years." The next few days passed in a strange, peaceful bubble. I knew that somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, then on a beach in Rio, my son and daughter-in-law were having the vacation of their dreams, at least until they tried to use that frozen card for the first time. But in our small Phoenix apartment, Robert and I were oddly calm. We used the time to prepare for my surgery, which was now just 4 days away. Robert rearranged our furniture so I could navigate with a walker. We stocked up on easy-to-prepare meals, and I even treated myself to some new pajamas, something I hadn't done in years. It felt strangely luxurious to spend money on myself without calculating whether Kieran and Isabella might need it first. Our phone had been blissfully quiet. No calls, no texts, no demands for money or emergency babysitting. For the first time in months, Robert and I read entire books without interruption, watched the movies we wanted to watch, and went to bed when we were tired instead of staying up worrying about their latest crisis. On Friday, I got a single text from Kieran. "Made it to Rio. Hotel is amazing." Isabella's mom cried when she saw the ocean. "Sophia loves the beach. Thanks for making this possible, Mom and Dad. Love you both." Robert read it over my shoulder and shook his head. "Thanks for making this possible." As if we'd voluntarily funded their vacation instead of having our surgery money stolen. I stared at that message for a long time. The casual entitlement of it was breathtaking. I didn't respond. Saturday morning, Mrs. Chen called. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said. "My law firm handles financial fraud cases. If you want to pursue this legally, you have options. Using someone's card beyond the stated permissions can be considered unauthorized access, especially if you have documentation of the limitations you set." "I'm not sure we want to go that far," I said, glancing at Robert, who was listening intently. "You don't have to decide now. Just know that you have recourse if the situation escalates." That afternoon, Robert and I did something we hadn't done in years. We went shopping for ourselves. Not for groceries or necessities, but for things we wanted. Robert bought a new book on woodworking, and I bought a beautiful plant for our kitchen window, some fancy coffee, and a soft throw blanket for our couch. The total was $87, money we would have previously saved just in case Kieran needed it. As we arranged the new plant on our windowsill, Robert said, "You know, I'd forgotten how long it's been since we did anything purely for our own enjoyment. Every purchase, every decision, every plan has been filtered through the question, but what if Kieran needs help?" He was right. We'd been living our lives on hold, waiting for their next emergency, their next crisis, their next need that would take priority over ours. The surgery scheduler called to confirm my Monday morning appointment. "You'll need someone to drive you home and stay with you for the first 24 hours, she reminded me. "My husband will be there," I said, squeezing Robert's hand. Sunday evening, we sat in our living room with my new throw blanket, sipping our fancy coffee and watching the sunset through our clean windows. Our phones sat silent on the coffee table. Soon, that silence would be broken, probably very loudly. But for now, we were going to enjoy this peace. Because I knew that in Rio, Kieran was about to try to pay for dinner at some expensive restaurant, and that frozen card was about to deliver the first lesson in consequences he'd had in years. Sunday evening, our phones exploded. Robert and I were in the middle of doing some light meal prep for my post-surgery recovery when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. Kieran's name flashed on the screen, but I didn't answer. It buzzed again, then again. Then a string of text messages started pouring in. "Mom, there's something wrong with the card. It's not working. The hotel says it's been declined for the room service. Can you call the bank? We're trying to pay for tomorrow's excursions, and nothing is going through. Mom and Dad, this is urgent. Something's wrong with your account." Robert looked at me and nodded. I called Kieran back. "Mom, thank God. There's something wrong with the bank card. We've been trying to pay for things all day, and it keeps getting declined. The hotel concierge thinks it might be a fraud hold because we're international." "Oh," I said calmly. "It's not a fraud hold. I canceled the card." Silence. Then, "What do you mean you canceled it?" "I mean I called the bank and reported it as stolen, which it was. You took my surgery money without permission to fund a vacation. That's theft." Robert was standing beside me now, his hand on my shoulder in support. "Mom, you can't be serious. We're in Brazil. How are we supposed to pay for anything?" "I imagine you'll figure it out the same way other people do, with your own money." I could hear muffled voices in the background, Isabella asking what was happening, then her voice getting clearer as Kieran put me on speaker. "Janet, Robert." Isabella's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "You need to fix this right now. We have dinner reservations tonight, and tomorrow we're supposed to go to Christ the Redeemer. My mother is here. Sophia is asking why we can't go to the fun places. You can't just leave us stranded." "We're not leaving you stranded, Isabella," Robert said, his voice steady. "You have your own credit cards, your own bank accounts. Use those." "Our credit cards are maxed out," Kieran blurted, then immediately seemed to regret revealing that information. Of course they were. These people who'd been spending our money on restaurants and wine and weekend trips had maxed out their own credit. They'd been living beyond their means for so long, they'd forgotten what their actual means were. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. "Mom, Dad," Kieran's voice was pleading now, "please don't do this. Can't you just reactivate the card? We'll pay you back when we get home, I promise." "Like you paid us back for the car repair?" Robert asked. "Or the 6 months of mortgage payments we covered? Or Isabella's tuition?" "Kieran, you've never paid us back for anything. You've just waited until the next crisis and asked for more money." "This is different," Isabella interjected. "This is family. My mother is here on her dream vacation. Sophia is going to be traumatized." "Your mother's dream vacation was funded by my medical necessity," I replied. "And I have surgery tomorrow morning." Another stunned silence. "Tomorrow?" Kieran asked. "I thought it wasn't until next month." "It was next month until you stole the money and I had to scramble to find an earlier slot. I'm having surgery tomorrow morning, and I'll be recovering while you're on the beach with money you stole from me." I could hear Isabella crying in the background now, and part of me, the old part, the part that had been trained to fix everything, wanted to cave. But Robert squeezed my shoulder and I thought about my knee, about the pain I'd been living with, about the 18-month wait if I missed this opportunity. "Figure it out," I said, and hung up. Robert pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. For the first time in years, we'd put ourselves first. We'd said no to their crisis and yes to my own needs. The phone rang again immediately. We turned it off and enjoyed the silence. We kept our phones off for the rest of Sunday, but Monday morning, surgery day, we turned them back on to see 23 missed calls and 61 text messages. The evolution of those messages told a story more revealing than any conversation could have. The early ones were pleading, "Mom, please reconsider. We're stuck here." Can you at least send enough to get us through the week? Sophia keeps asking why we can't do fun things anymore. Then they turned manipulative. Isabella's mom is having panic attacks. She's never been out of the country before, and now she's terrified we won't be able to get home. You're ruining what's supposed to be a healing trip for a woman who just lost her husband. Sophia doesn't understand why Grandma and Grandpa are being mean. By Sunday evening, they'd become angry. This is the most selfish thing you've ever done. How can you sleep at night knowing you've stranded your own family in a foreign country? Dad, I thought you'd be more reasonable than Mom. And finally, by early Monday morning, they'd turned vicious. We know you did this on purpose. You waited until we were gone to destroy our vacation. Isabella's mom says she never wants to see you again, and honestly, neither do I. Sophia is going to remember this for the rest of her life. That last message stung, but it also clarified everything. This was who my son really was when he didn't get his way. Not the grateful child asking for help, but an entitled adult who felt he deserved unlimited access to our resources. But the messages weren't the worst part. The worst part was what Robert discovered when he logged into our online banking before we left for the hospital. They'd tried to use the card 18 times after I'd told them it was canceled. 18 separate attempts, ranging from a $200 restaurant charge to a $1,500 helicopter tour. Even after I'd explicitly told them the card was frozen, they'd kept trying to use it, hoping we were bluffing or that somehow they could force it to work. Then Robert saw something that made his blood run cold. There were 5 attempts to use the card at an ATM for cash advances, transactions that would have charged enormous fees and interest if they'd gone through. They weren't just trying to salvage their vacation. They were trying to extract as much money as possible from an account they knew wasn't theirs to use. But the final revelation came in an email forwarded to me by mistake. Clearly, Kieran had meant to send it to someone else. It was a message to one of his friends. Parents cut off the card, but we're going to contest it when we get back. They gave me access to the account, so legally it's probably joint property. My buddy, who's a paralegal, says we can probably force them to pay for the whole trip since they ruined it. They weren't just angry about losing their vacation. They were planning to sue us for money they'd stolen, claiming we'd somehow wronged them by protecting our own assets. As the nurse wheeled me into pre-op, Robert walking beside me, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't about family loyalty or helping during tough times. This was about 2 people who decided that our financial security was their playground, and they were angry that we'd finally locked the gate. The anesthesiologist asked if I had any concerns before surgery. None at all, I said, meaning it completely. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do for myself. Whatever happened with Kieran and Isabella, Robert and I would handle it when I woke up. Right now, I was taking care of me. I woke up from surgery to find my new knee wrapped in bandages and my phone buzzing with notifications that made my recovery room suddenly feel like a war zone. While I'd been unconscious, Kieran and Isabella had apparently decided that if they couldn't get our money, they'd try to destroy our reputation instead. Robert was sitting beside my bed, his face grim as he scrolled through his phone. "They've lost their minds," he said quietly. The messages were no longer just angry. They were calculated and cruel. But worse than that, they'd escalated beyond our family. Isabella had posted on social media, tagging not just us but also my workplace, our church, and several of our mutual acquaintances. Her Facebook post read, "Stranded in Brazil because my in-laws decided to teach us a lesson by cutting off financial support in the middle of our family trip. Some people should never become grandparents if they can't understand that family comes first. Praying we can find a way home." Family betrayal. Elderly, selfish, stranded abroad. She'd tagged the Phoenix Public Library system where I worked, along with a comment, "This is the type of person you have working with children, someone who abandons family members in foreign countries." But the social media attack was just the beginning. Robert showed me that they'd also contacted my workplace directly. My supervisor, Kieran, had left me a voicemail. "Janet, I got a very concerning call from someone claiming to be your daughter-in-law. She says you've stolen money from your son and abandoned them in Brazil. I'm sure there's more to this story, but please call me when you're feeling up to it." They'd also somehow gotten the number for our church and spoken to Pastor Williams. His message was gentler but equally bewildering. "Janet, Robert, I had a young woman call saying she's married to your son. She's very upset and says there's been some kind of financial dispute that's left them stranded abroad. I told her I'd pray for your family's reconciliation. Call me if you need to talk." As I lay there in my hospital bed, groggy from anesthesia but clear-headed enough to recognize what was happening, I realized Kieran and Isabella had crossed a line from family conflict into something much more serious. They were trying to damage my professional reputation, our community standing, and our relationships, all because we'd refused to let them steal our surgery money. My nurse, a woman named Rosa who'd been checking on me regularly, noticed my distress. "Is everything okay, honey? You look upset." "My son and his wife are trying to get me fired from my job," I said, then immediately felt foolish for sharing something so personal. But Rosa just nodded knowingly. "Family can be the hardest sometimes. What did they do?" "They used my medical savings for a vacation to Brazil, and when we canceled their access to our bank account, they started calling my workplace and church to tell them we're terrible people." Rosa's eyebrows shot up. "They're in Brazil right now? And they're using your recovery time to make phone calls trying to get you in trouble?" Hearing it summarized like that made Robert and me realize how truly twisted the situation had become. Our son was literally on vacation with money he'd stolen from us. And instead of being grateful or ashamed, he was spending his beach time trying to sabotage our livelihoods. "You know what you need to do," Rosa said, adjusting my IV. "You need to document everything. Screenshots, voicemails, everything. This isn't family drama anymore. This is harassment." She was right. They'd made this bigger than a family dispute. They'd involved my employer, our faith community, and who knows who else in their campaign to punish us for protecting our own money. That evening, despite the pain medication making me drowsy, Robert helped me start taking screenshots of every social media post, saving every voicemail, and forwarding every email to a dedicated folder. If they wanted to play this game, we'd make sure we had evidence of every move they made. By Thursday, I was mobile enough to sit at our kitchen table with my laptop, my phone, and a legal pad filled with notes. The pain medication kept me fuzzy, but my anger kept me focused. Kieran and Isabella had made this a public battle, and Robert and I were going to finish it. First, I called Kieran at the library and explained the entire situation. I told her about the stolen surgery money, the Brazil trip, and the vindictive phone calls. "I'm sorry they involved my workplace in this," I said. "This is a personal family matter that we've been trying to handle privately." "Janet," Kieran said, "I've worked with you for 6 years. I know your character. When someone calls here ranting about an employee, my first instinct is to protect that employee, not believe random accusations. Don't worry about your job. But you should know, this woman called 4 times yesterday. She's persistent." "I'm documenting everything," I told her. "If it continues, we'll be involving legal counsel." Next, Robert called Pastor Williams and gave him the same explanation. His response was immediate. "Robert, Janet, what can the church community do to support you? Would you like me to organize meals during Janet's recovery?" The contrast was striking. The people who actually knew us believed us and offered help. The people who only knew Kieran and Isabella's version were getting a very different story. Then we did something that felt both scary and empowering. We called Mrs. Chen's law firm and asked to speak with an attorney about harassment and defamation. Attorney Michael Torres listened to our story and reviewed the screenshots we'd taken. "You have several options here," he said. "The social media posts that name your employer could constitute defamation, especially since they contain false statements about your character and conduct. The repeated calls to your workplace could be considered harassment, and depending on how they accessed your bank account information, there might be privacy violations as well." "What would you recommend?" Robert asked. "A cease and desist letter first. It's formal enough to show you're serious, but it gives them a chance to stop the behavior before we escalate to legal action. If they continue after receiving the letter, we can pursue restraining orders and potentially a defamation lawsuit. The letter was sent via email and certified mail to Kieran's address. It was beautifully cold and professional, demanding that they immediately stop all contact with my employer, remove all social media posts mentioning us, and cease all attempts to damage our professional or personal reputation. But we weren't done. We also called our bank's fraud department and reported the 18 unauthorized attempts to use our account after we'd explicitly revoked permission. Even though the transactions didn't go through, I explained, they tried to use the card repeatedly after we told them it was canceled. We want this documented in case they try to claim they had ongoing permission. The fraud investigator was thorough. Were these family members? She asked. Our son and daughter-in-law? I see this more often than you'd think, she said sadly. Family members who feel entitled to someone else's money will flag this account for any future unauthorized access attempts. Finally, Robert did something that surprised even me. He created a social media post on our shared Facebook account. We rarely use social media, but he wrote a clear, factual statement. Recently, family members have been spreading false information about us on social media and contacting my wife's workplace with malicious lies. We want our friends and community to know that Janet is recovering well from surgery that we paid for with our own money, despite attempts by others to prevent her from receiving necessary medical care. We ask for privacy during this time and want to thank everyone who has offered support during this difficult situation. Within hours, the responses poured in. Coworkers, church friends, neighbors, and even some people we barely knew offered support, shared their own stories of family financial abuse, and expressed outrage on our behalf. Mrs. Patterson from down the hall wrote, "I've watched Janet and Robert sacrifice for their son for years. It's about time they put themselves first." The power dynamic had completely shifted. Instead of being the villains in Kieran and Isabella's victim story, we were surrounded by a community that knew our character and supported our decisions. That evening, I got a text from Kieran. "We received the lawyer letter. You're really going to sue your own son?" I typed back, "We're going to protect ourselves from people who steal our money and try to destroy our reputation. If that happens to include our son, then so be it." For the first time in our relationship, Robert and I had the power, and Kieran knew it. 3 weeks post-surgery, I was walking with just a cane and feeling stronger than I had in months. Not just physically, but emotionally. My recovery had been peaceful, supported by neighbors who brought meals, church friends who offered rides to physical therapy, and coworkers who checked in regularly. Robert and I realized we'd had a support system all along. We'd just been too focused on Kieran and Isabella's drama to notice it. They'd returned from Brazil the previous week, and the silence from their end was deafening. The cease and desist letter had worked. All social media posts about us had been deleted, and there were no more harassing phone calls to my workplace. But more importantly, there were no more calls to us either. No requests for money, no manufactured emergencies, no casual assumptions that our resources were theirs to use. At first, I'd waited for the guilt to hit. Shouldn't we feel bad about cutting off our only child? Shouldn't we be worried about our relationship with our granddaughter, Sophia? But the guilt never came. Instead, Robert and I felt something we hadn't experienced in years: peace. My physical therapy was going well enough that Dr. Patel said I'd have full mobility within 2 months. We'd paid for the surgery with a combination of our remaining savings and a medical payment plan that we could afford with our combined income, once we weren't subsidizing someone else's lifestyle. The real transformation, though, was in how we saw ourselves. We'd spent so many years defining our worth through our willingness to sacrifice for Kieran that we'd forgotten we were complete people with our own needs, dreams, and boundaries. We weren't just parents. We were Robert and Janet, a couple who enjoyed reading mystery novels together, tending to plants, and having conversations that didn't revolve around other people's crises. Last Thursday, we did something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. We signed up for a pottery class at the community center. It was $60 each for 8 weeks, money we would have previously saved just in case Kieran needed it. Now, we spent it on something that brought us joy, without apology or explanation. Yesterday, Kieran finally broke the silence. He sent a single text. "Mom, Dad, I think we need to talk." Robert and I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "We're open to a conversation when you're ready to take responsibility for your actions and discuss how we can have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation." His response came quickly. "That's not fair. We're family." "Exactly," Robert replied. "Family members don't steal from each other or try to destroy each other's reputations. When you're ready to treat us like family instead of like an ATM, let us know." We haven't heard back from him yet, and that's okay. For the first time in years, we're not waiting by the phone for his call, not worrying about his next crisis, not calculating whether we have enough saved to bail him out of his latest poor decision. We're living our own lives, in our own space, with our own money, on our own terms. We've learned that saying no to other people's dysfunction is the same as saying yes to your own well-being. If Kieran wants a relationship with us, he knows where to find us. But he'll find different people than the ones he left behind. People who know their worth isn't measured by their willingness to be used. We're not his parents anymore in the way we used to be. We're the boundary he should have respected all along, and the lesson he's finally old enough to learn. And as for our granddaughter Sophia, we hope that someday she'll understand that the greatest gift we could give her was showing her what it looks like to respect yourself enough to demand respect from others.